The Tau Empire has one of the most absurdly deep rosters of war machines in all of Warhammer 40,000. From lightweight infiltration suits that bend light around the pilot to building-sized walking gun platforms that make Imperial Knights nervous. So today, we're breaking down every single Tau Battlesuit, what they do, how they work, and why they exist, starting with the one that lets you disappear. XY-25 Stealth Battlesuit. Imagine being invisible on a Warhammer 40,000 battlefield, a galaxy where everything is trying to kill you with chainsaw swords and literal demon fire, and you just get to not be seen. That's the XY-25. This thing is barely bulkier than standard Fire Warrior armor, wrapped in stealth field generators that bend light around the wearer. You are functionally invisible, not hard to spot. Invisible. Thermal, visual, electromagnetic, all of it gets scrambled. And the pilot isn't hiding in there hoping for the best. They're neurally linked to layered sensor systems, perceiving the battlefield through overlapping thermal, audio, and electromagnetic feeds simultaneously. Standard loadout is an ARM-integrated burst cannon. You appear, dump rounds into a squad, and vanish, but one in every 3 suits can swap that for a fusion blaster, giving the team anti-armor capability for when something big and metal needs to stop existing. Here's where it gets cool. Stealth teams can network their cloaking fields to generate holographic duplicates of each squad member. Enemies think they're being hit from 6 directions when there are only 3 actual suits, and the squad leader can carry a homing beacon, allowing heavier battlesuits to deep strike directly onto whatever the stealth team just marked. The XY-25 is the scalpel. It finds the target, creates chaos, and calls in the cavalry. But the cavalry itself? That's a whole different beast. XV-8. Crisis Battlesuit. Every Fire Warrior in the Tau Empire dreams of piloting one of these. The XV-8 Crisis Battlesuit isn't just the backbone of Tau military doctrine. It's a status symbol, a badge that says you survived enough combat deployments to earn the right to strap into something this dangerous. The XV-8 has 3 independent hardpoint weapon slots. 3. Each one can mount any combination of weapons and support systems the pilot wants, meaning the number of possible loadout configurations is generally absurd. You can turn this thing into a dedicated tank killer, an infantry shredder, or a close support platform. And from the outside, they all look exactly the same. A single hunter cadre can field a dozen crisis suits performing completely different battlefield roles, and the enemy has zero way of knowing which one is about to ruin their day until it's already happening. But here's the thing, 3 weapons firing simultaneously means the pilot has to mentally partition control of 3 separate systems while tracking targets and coordinating with squad mates through tactical data feeds. That's not a skill most warriors have. That's a cognitive challenge only the absolute elite can master without turning their own squad into friendly fire statistics. And the premium weapon option, the Cyclic Ion Blaster. Strength 7, AP -1, with the ability to overcharge to Strength 8 and D3 damage. The catch is that overcharging risks mortal wounds on hit rolls of 1, which is, not ideal. But when a full squad drops in loaded with 3 of these each, whatever they're pointing at stops existing. But if the crisis suit is the flexible all-rounder, wait until you see what happens when the Tau decide flexibility is overrated and just want to delete a tank from across the map. SV-88 Broadside. Every army needs a gun that makes tank commanders nervous. The Tau have the broadside. The XV-88 is the dedicated tank destroyer of the battlesuit lineup, a walking anti-armor platform that looks at mobility and says no thanks, I'll take more gun instead, where the crisis suit is a Swiss army knife. The broadside is a sniper rifle. One job, one very, very dead target. Here's what makes it special. The heavy rail rifle fires projectiles at such absurd velocity that they don't just hit a tank, they go through the tank, in one side, out the other, with enough leftover energy to cause catastrophic damage to whatever's inside. Crew, ammo storage, the pilot's lunch. Gone. On the tabletop, that translates to Strength 9, AP -4, D3+3 damage, and every successful wound roll slaps on an additional mortal wound. Do the math and you're looking at roughly 6 total wounds per successful hit, on a model that costs 75 points. That's absurd value for money. But maybe precision isn't your thing. Maybe you just want to fill the sky with explosives. The high-yield missile pod gives you 60 inches of range, with heavy 8 shots at Strength 7, AP -2. Less surgical, more I'd like to delete that entire area of the board please. The pilots themselves are a different breed too. Broadside operators don't train for general combat adaptability like crisis pilots. They train specifically in fire control and ballistic computation, plugging into the system-linked neural interface and becoming extensions of their own targeting computers, constantly updating firing solutions, constantly recalculating. Less warrior, more human artillery piece. But if the broadside is about standing still and hitting hard, the next suit on our list is about never being seen at all. XV-95 Ghostkeel. The Tau are a collectivist species. Everything they do revolves around the greater good, shared purpose, hierarchical command, working together, so naturally they built a battlesuit that turns one of their warriors into a lone predator operating completely independently behind enemy lines, which is, not contradictory at all. The XV-95 Ghostkeel is the pinnacle of TOW stealth technology, and it's not a subtle little recon platform like the XV-25. This thing looms several times the height of a fire warrior, mounts a full array of repulsor jets, and carries enough firepower to gut an armored column. And it does all of this while being essentially invisible. That feels almost unfair, but here's where it gets interesting. The XV-25 uses stealth defensively. Stay hidden, gather intel, maybe pop off a few shots and disappear. The Ghostkeel flips that entire philosophy. Its pilots use stealth aggressively, remaining invisible until the perfect moment to unleash absolute devastation, then vanishing before the enemy can even figure out where the fire came from. It's not hiding, it's hunting. For weapons, pilots choose between two primary systems. The Fusion Collider delivers Strength 8, AP -4, D6 damage with heavy D3 melt at 18 inches. Basically a short-range anti-armor nightmare. The alternative, Cyclic Ironraker, offers 24-inch range at Strength 7, heavy 6 shots with overcharged capability pushing to Strength 8 and D3 damage at the cost of mortal wounds on rolled ones. Either way, something is dying. But the real story is the pilots themselves. Ghostkeel operators undergo psychological conditioning for solitary operations and independent tactical judgment. In a species that prizes collective action above everything, these warriors are trained to function as lone wolves. They make their own calls, choose their own targets, disappear on their own terms. They're almost alien to their own people. And that's just a stealth suit. Wait until you see what happens when the TOW stop caring about subtlety entirely. XV-104 Riptide. The Riptide is the suit where the TOW Earth cast looked at the Crisis battlesuit and said, what if we made it twice as tall and strapped an unstable dark matter reactor to the pilot's spine? And then they actually did it. Here's the thing, the XV-104 only exists because of one piece of technology, the dark matter Nova reactor. This is an experimental power pack that fuses dark matter to produce energy on scales previously impossible in any portable platform. Before this reactor, a battlesuit this size with this much firepower simply couldn't function. The power demands were too extreme. So the Earthcast solved the problem by inventing a miniaturized dark matter fusion device and bolting it centimeters from a living person's body, which is, not ideal. Riptide pilots don't just climb in and start shooting. They have to enter a meditative state of consciousness while their neural interface connects directly to one of the most unstable technologies the TOW have ever created. Your brain is literally plugged into a reactor that could kill you faster than anything on the battlefield. Every moment of piloting is a balancing act between controlling devastating weapon systems and making sure the thing powering them doesn't cook you from the inside out. But when it works, the Nova reactor can be pushed into overdrive, flooding the suit with extra power that turns the Riptide into a walking artillery battery. Weapon salvos at full output destroy light transports and enemy skimmers through chained explosions, while missile systems devastate entire area targets simultaneously. And the whole time, a sleek Riptide shield generator mounted on one arm keeps the pilot alive through punishment that would shred lesser suits in seconds. The Riptide doesn't just hit hard, it absorbs hits, dishes out apocalyptic firepower, and asks its pilot to meditate through the whole thing. But if you think that's a big machine, wait until you see what happens when the TOW stop building battlesuits entirely and start building walking gun platforms. KV-128 Storm Surge. Every battlesuit we've talked about so far has one thing in common. The pilot moves the arms, the pilot fires the guns, the pilot is the warrior. The Storm Surge throws all of that out the window. This thing is classified as a ballistic suit, a completely new category the TOW invented because nothing else fit. It's not an exoskeleton. It's not a mech in the traditional sense. It's a walking warship. The pilot inside a Storm Surge doesn't personally control every weapon and every limb. They function as a tactical commander, directing semi-autonomous systems that handle targeting, firing, and movement coordination on their own. The operator's job is to think, prioritize, and delegate, which is, not exactly what you'd expect from something called a battlesuit. Storm Surge pilots don't even train the same way as other battlesuit operators, where a Crisis pilot sharpens combat reflexes, and a Riptide pilot learns to manage experimental experimental reactor systems. Storm Surge candidates undergo training in delegation and systematic thinking. They develop command and control mindsets closer to someone running an independent military unit than someone strapping into a cockpit. The pilot is essentially a general who happens to be sitting inside the weapon. And what a weapon it is. The primary armament is either a pulse driver cannon or a pulse blast cannon, both among the largest pulse weapons ever developed. These generate so much recoil that the suit mounts dedicated counter-recoil thrusters just to avoid tearing itself apart. Then you've got missile pods, smart missile systems, burst cannons, flamers, and fragmentation projectors all bolted onto the same chassis. A single Storm Surge can handle infantry, armor, and everything in between entirely on its own. They proved it against Imperial heavy armor columns, whole lines of tanks gone, super heavy walkers that had been shrugging off conventional TOW firepower, felled by a single earth-shaking volley. The Imperium had never seen anything like it from the TOW. And honestly, neither had the TOW. But if the Storm Surge represents the TOW building bigger, the next entry proves they never stopped refining what they already had. XV-85 Enforcer Battlesuit. Some commanders want stealth, others want speed. And then there are the ones who look at a battlefield and think I should be the scariest thing on it. The XV-85 Enforcer is the battlesuit for that third type of person. Known for its rugged strength and raw firepower, the Enforcer is the no-nonsense commander's platform. No cloaking fields, no blistering top speed, just thick armor, heavy weapons, and the unambiguous allure of being the biggest gun your troops can rally behind. It's the TOW equivalent of a general who leads from the front by being physically impossible to ignore. But here's where it gets interesting. The Enforcer isn't just a beefier crisis suit with a promotion. The neural interface operates on a completely different level. Enforcer pilots maintain what's essentially dual consciousness. One half of their brain is fighting personally, tracking targets, managing weapons, staying alive. The other half is simultaneously processing command and control data from every subordinate unit and tactical feed in the area. It's like playing a first-person shooter and a real-time strategy game at the same time, with your life on the line, which is, not ideal. Standard loadout comes with a burst cannon and missile pod, giving solid general purpose firepower out of the box. Both weapons can be swapped from the full range weapon and support systems lists, plus 2 additional items for 3 total hardpoint equivalents. Plenty of room to customize. SEP-specific signature systems add another layer. TOW-set commanders get vectored maneuvering thrusters for a 6-inch reposition after shooting. Daleth commanders get the dynamic mirror field, providing enhanced defensive bonuses for leaders who insist on standing in the thick of it. Enforcers can also bring up to 2 tactical drones, creating a compact command element that hits hard and leads harder. But if the Enforcer is the suit for commanders who want to be the heaviest thing on the field, the Cold Star is for commanders who'd rather be the fastest. XV-86 Cold Star Battlesuit. This is the fighter jet of the TOW arsenal. Every other battlesuit on this list is trying to balance firepower with durability or stealth or some other tactical consideration. The Cold Star looked at all of that and said, what if I just wasn't here when you shot at me? And honestly, that's a valid strategy. The XV-86 is the fastest platform the TOW have ever built. We're talking 24 inches of movement in the movement phase. That's not repositioning. That's teleportation with extra steps. The suit reclassifies the commander as a flying monstrous creature, granting 12 to 24 inches of movement depending on whether the pilot feels like cruising or doing a full speed dive straight into someone's backline. Side armor, rear armor, that one unit your opponent thought was safe behind a building. Nothing is safe. But here's the trade-off. The Cold Star cannot make a thrust movement in the assault phase. You get all that speed up front and then you're stuck wherever you land. So you better pick your spot carefully because there's no scooting behind cover afterward. The fixed weapons are a missile pod at strength 7, AP-4, assault 2, and a high intensity burst cannon at strength 5, AP-5, assault 6, twin-linked. That burst cannon shreds infantry reliably. 6 twin-linked shots means even on Overwatch, you're landing hits consistently. Here's the thing nobody mentions enough. The Cold Star is the only independent character in the entire TOW armory with move through cover. Every terrain penalty gone. You're hopping through ruins, forests, craters, whatever, without losing a single inch of that precious movement. For a suit built entirely around positioning, that's not a nice bonus. That's the whole point. The neural interface reflects this philosophy completely. Inertial dampening feedback, split-second reflex enhancement, psychological conditioning to embrace operating at the edge of controlled flight. Because at 24 inches per turn, a miscalculation isn't a setback. It's a crater. But if speed is one way to avoid getting hit, the next suit takes a completely different approach. One where the enemy can't shoot what they can't see. XV-22 Stealth Suit. The XV-25 is a fantastic stealth platform. Nobody's arguing that, but the Earth cast looked at it and said, yeah, we can do better. The XV-22 is what happened next. This is a classified prototype that takes everything the XV-25 does well and pushes it further. Better cloaking technology, better targeting systems, and one addition that changes the entire equation, a miniaturized shield generator. Standard XV-25S don't have that. They rely entirely on not being seen. The XV-22 has a backup plan for when things go sideways, which is not ideal for a stealth suit to need, but extremely ideal for the pilot inside it. Here's where it gets interesting. The cloaking field on this thing isn't just on or off. XV-22 pilots modulate field intensity in real time based on what they're doing. Full invisibility while repositioning, partial cloaking while firing so the suit can discharge weapons without completely giving away its position. It's like playing a volume knob in the middle of a firefight, except the volume knob determines whether you live or die. The weapons are different too. Instead of the XV-25's arm-integrated burst cannon, the XV-22 mounts shoulder-mounted missile pods. That's a massive upgrade in anti-armor flexibility, addressing the one thing stealth teams always struggle with, punching through anything heavier than infantry. The integrated drone controller lets pilots coordinate support drones directly, turning a single fire warrior into a small combined arms element operating behind enemy lines. One-person kill team with its own entourage. Pilots aren't just assigned to these things either. They're selected through rigorous testing. Every XV-22 pilot accepts they're essentially a battlefield test subject, feeding combat data back to the Earthcast so the next version can be even more terrifying. But if the XV-22 is what happens when you refine a proven concept, the Arvarna is what happens when you throw the entire concept out the window and start from scratch. XV-107 Arvarna. The Riptide is already one of the most terrifying things the TOW can throw at you. So naturally, the Earthcast looked at it and said, what if we made one that carpet bombs everything? That's the Arvarna. Same chassis, same dark matter nova reactor humming away inside like a miniature star having an identity crisis. But instead of precision weapons designed to pick apart individual targets, the Arvarna mounts twin-pulse sub-munitions cannons. These are experimental weapons that fire micro-cluster projectiles, which then scatter into additional sub-munitions across the entire target area. So one shot becomes many shots, and many shots become a plasma storm that covers everything in explosions, which is, not ideal if you're standing in it. Here's the thing, standard pulse weapons focus energy into narrow beams. That's the whole philosophy. Concentrate power, punch through armor, kill the thing you're pointing at. The Arvarna throws that philosophy into a dumpster and lights it on fire. Instead of focusing destructive power into a single point, it distributes it across broad target areas, hitting multiple enemies simultaneously. It's less sniper rifle and more the sky's falling and the sky's made of plasma. And the TOW built this thing for a very specific reason. Encounter with massed heavy assault elements, Imperial Knights stomping across the battlefield in groups, Tyrannid Biotitans lumbering forward in waves prove that picking off individual targets wasn't enough. You need sustained area denial firepower that can devastate entire formations at once. The Arvarna is that answer. It also carries heavier armor than the standard Riptide, trading mobility for defensive protection. This isn't a suit that dances around the battlefield. It walks forward, plants itself like a strategic defensive anchor, and turns everything in front of it into a parking lot. Enemy formation control becomes literally impossible when the ground is saturating with explosive submunitions. But if the Arvarna is the Riptide reimagined as a walking carpet bomber, the next variant went in the exact opposite direction. And it's terrifying for completely different reasons. XV-109 Ivahra. The TOW built a close combat monster. Let that sink in for a second. The species whose entire military philosophy revolves around shoot them before they get close, looked at the battlefield and said, you know what we need? A suit that runs directly at the enemy and sets them on fire at point blank range. Which is, not ideal for a culture that considers melee combat a failure state. But here's the thing, they didn't build it because they wanted to. They built it because they had to. The Ivahra is a Riptide derivative, rushed into deployment after the Arvarna proved that experimental Riptide variants could actually work in the field. But where the Arvarna sat back and saturated areas with submunitions from a comfortable distance, the Ivahra does the exact opposite. It closes the gap. Imperial Knights, Tyrannid Biotitans, things that could shrug off concentrated TOW firepower at standard engagement ranges were becoming a serious problem. The solution was a suit designed to get so close that heavy armor basically stops mattering. Its primary weapon is the Phase Plasma Flamer, a triple-barreled rotary flamer that generates temperatures so extreme the flames exist in a plasma-like state rather than conventional fire. Not a flamethrower, not a plasma gun. Something in between that has zero business existing, and yet here we are. Ivahra pilots are pulled from Riptide cadres but receive specialized close combat neural training emphasizing aggressive movement and rapid threat response. They undergo psychological conditioning to overcome the natural Tau hesitancy about closing with heavily armored enemies. Essentially, the Earth caste took methodical, range-focused warriors and turned them into something approaching berserkers. The pilots learn to internalize that point-blank range is where their suit becomes most lethal rather than most vulnerable. That's a complete philosophical rewiring of everything a fire warrior is taught from day one. The Yavahra is the suit that proves desperation breeds innovation. When your doctrine can't solve the problem, you build something that violates your doctrine entirely. But if the Yavahra represents Tau desperation at the tactical level, wait until you see what they built when the desperation went strategic. KX-139 Tiaunar Supremacy Armor. At some point, the Tau stopped building battlesuits and started building monuments. The KX-139 Tiaunar Supremacy Armor is the single most destructive platform the Earth caste has ever produced, a walking fortress designed for static defense, carrying weapons that rival small Imperial Titans in raw destructive output. This thing doesn't fight battles, it ends them. Here's how it came to exist. Earth caste engineer Fioo Kelshan Cho'an watched Tau heavy flyers get systematically outclassed by Imperial Knights and Tyranid Biotitans, enemies so massive and so heavily armored that existing Tau platforms simply could not answer them. The Tau Empire was being made to feel small in its own galaxy. So Cho'an built something that would never feel small again. The headline weapons are the paired tri-axis ion cannons. These are rapid-firing, multi-chambered particle weapons that can adjust their power levels and rate of fire on the fly. Light infantry, shredded. Heavily armored vehicles, melted. Everything in between, also melted. And here's the jaw-drop detail. They never need to reload. They never need to cool down. As long as the reactor feeds them power, they just keep firing. 2 of them, simultaneously. Which is, not ideal if you're standing on the other side. On top of that, the Pulse Ordnance Multi-Driver provides additional firepower through specialized ammunition selection, allowing the Tiaunar to engage completely different target types at the same time. Infantry column on the left, super heavy tank on the right. Both handled. A single Tiaunar functions as an independent military force. One platform, one pilot. An entire army's worth of problems, and that pilot isn't just steering, they're commanding. The neural interface feeds constant information about target priorities, ammunition status, power generation, and defensive systems across hundreds of meters of controlled firepower. The pilot of a Tiaunar doesn't think like a warrior. They think like a general strapped into a god. The Tiaunar lacks the maneuverability of every other suit on this list. It doesn't need it. It plants itself on the battlefield and dares the enemy to come closer. Most don't get the chance. Every battlesuit we've covered represents a different answer to a different problem. The Tiaunar is the answer to all of them at once. It's what the Tau Empire builds when the greater good demands that nothing on the battlefield survives. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.